I'm so happy that you're here today. Thank you for being a part of my day. As I gave you a heads up, there are some questions to talk about. So, firstly, who are you and how are you working your way upward?
Who am I? Sometimes the question who are you is a very loaded question. I'm a man. I am a black male. I am a dad. And I'm a senior lecturer at Ober Academy University. And how am I working my way upward? There are several ways through which I'm working. Right now, I think it's through inspiring others to also work their ways upward. That's the short answer.
And that's a good answer. I am a person who's a researcher, so I love to think about, how do we measure things? How do we direct things? So, for you, what signals to you that you're actually working your way in the direction you want to go?
I think it's seeing my students, my former students, seeing what they are or they are out there when they graduate or when they leave our program, when they leave my kind of my guidance. I'm very proud of that. That's something that inspired me, makes me very happy. I see the way they think, I see the way they view the world, I see what they're doing, and I'm like, maybe that's a mark of success. And but not all of them go on and do great things. But those who don't do great things, it's also in their mind who they are and the potential that they have to becoming whatever they want to be. And if that's what they want to be, then that's also fine.
That's interesting. So, someone always asked me this question when I was little. They'd always ask, "What do I want to be? What do you want to be?"
I think I want to be just who I am. When I was young, I always wanted to be a teacher. That's something that most of my friends would attest to. And I think I'm where I am, where I've always wanted to be. I like doing research a lot because research also helps me stay very active. Unfortunately, in my line of work, I my teaching load is just so much, and I don't have a lot of time to do research. But I like doing research and doing teaching. Also, if I circle back to your previous question, is also that very now and then I get contacts from LinkedIn. People say, "Me and I've been using your work. I've been reading your work a lot when I write about racism in Finland. Thank you for doing the work." That also means that that's also recognition that I'm doing something or I've done something. When I walk around and people say, "Oh, I mean, happy to meet you. I've read your work and your work. You've kind of inspired me a lot." And I'm like, well, I'm happy you're doing the work because my goal as a researcher has always been not just doing the work myself because it can be very lonely, because very often I've always looked my work as a anti-racism researcher as a one human being pushing the elephant, trying to push the elephant out. This elephant is this whole racism, and the more people you get involved in pushing the elephant out, the more chance we can get in pushing the elephant out. And so when I see these new young researchers coming up and they're saying, "Oh, I've read your work and I really enjoyed your work, I like your perspective," I'm like, yeah, that means that's a sign that I've done something and it makes me happy. But of course, it also it reminds me that I have to keep doing the work because the work doesn't just end based on what I've done. You have to join them and we have to continue in doing this work.
I love the metaphor, like pushing the elephant out. I'm probably going to borrow that at some point, just to let you know. So I think I'm one of the people who actually got to know you through your research. I read about that you work with anti-racism, and it got me thinking about things in different ways. I appreciate you recruiting me to be one of the elephant pushers out there. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And about the elephant, you see, the whole metaphor goes like this: that sometimes as anti-racism researchers, the elephant in the room is racism and we get to push these elephants. And you can do it. The more we do it, the more. A lot of time when we do it, the elephant doesn't budge. It just stays there. It looks at you. Once in a while, it budges an inch. And the days when it budges an inch, when it just moves that little inch, you go and you're like, yeah, move, it moved, and you're so excited because it gives you hope that these elephants can really move. And then you come back the next day, it's right there in your face, like it never moved. And you have to push it again and push it and push and push and push. And then you realize that it takes maybe a while before it moves again. You're like, oh, but whenever it moves, the joy that you have that it moved, it makes the whole anti-racism work worth it. It makes your whole struggle. You feel like you feel fulfilled. You feel like finally it did move. And the more people you get involved into this whole pushing of this elephant. If when you did push alone, let's just say it takes a week for it to budge. When other people come in, it may take 3 days for it to budge. And the more people come in, it may take one day. It may budge after every single day. I'm not saying that we're gonna push it completely out of the room because it's still the room has four walls that keeps it in. But our job is to try to force it out of the door. The door is too small, but our job is to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Hopefully, someday we'll go out.
You know what? Speaking of doors, I have to say one of the reasons why I was most excited to talk to you is because not just the research that you do. I got to know you through your research and you're presenting on that and particularly you're talking about the effects of racism on children and their perceptions of that. And that was something that resonated with me as a parent myself. Um, but when I looked into what you do and how you do things in this world, one thing I really appreciated was that you are a person who you open doors for others. So you're not just pushing racism out the door, you're actually opening up doors of opportunities for others. The people that you have that you work with, the people that you are raising up in some ways to be able to change things in this world. That's a beautiful thing to see. And you also teach people to break down doors, you know. So, and that's a great thing to be able to watch as you're thinking about like how do we get racism out the room. One of the things is how do you open up the door in the first place to push the elephant out. And I think that's a great thing that you've been doing through your work that I get to see whenever I pop into Global Academy and I get to behold your students that are out there and as they're growing and the questions that they ask and I've worked as a mentor, through your program. And that's always been such an enlightening thing for me to be able to see what the next generation is doing. So I am impressed. Thank you so much for what you do and not just the pushing, but the people that you get to keep pushing and the doors that you break down so that way we can push the elephant out.
Yeah, thank you. And just to comment on this, it's you see, I got into this work because I became a dad. Yeah, so that's how I got it. That's how I got into anti-racism work. Because when I came into Finland, racism was a norm to me. It was everywhere. And when I complained, everybody said, "Why you bother? It's a norm. But why are you worried yourself about it? It's not, this is how it is." And I accepted it. I said, "Okay, this is the norm. I'm going to swim with it." But then when I became a dad, I said, "No, I accepted this because I came in as an immigrant. But for my daughters who were born here, I said, this can't be the norm for them." So that's why I got into this whole job. That's why I started fighting about this. My goal then my goal then, even now, it was basically to make Finland better for them. So they grew up into a better Finland. And I wanted to kind of work within education because I realized that what I was trying to do was to affect the next teacher who would be anti-racism conscious in a way that when they meet them and teach them, they would understand who they are. They would teach them with the recognition that these children are as Finnish as any other. They belong here and they are above everything else. They are human beings and they deserve to be treated as human beings. And the fact that they have a, a drop of black blood in their vein doesn't make them less than anyone else. That's why I got into this job. And now talking about my work at the Global Academy, as you know, I have this very interesting course which I do every year. It's called Racism, and Anti-Racism, because I think that sometimes in Finland, the racism education is still very stuck at the level of just teaching that racism is bad, teaching about racism. And I feel like we need to do more than just teaching about racism because we are at the level, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it was okay to just teach about racism. But right now, we need to move the bar beyond just teaching about racism. We have to start teaching people to learn how to be anti-racism actors. And so for me, for that course, my goal was just to teach about the concept of racism or the concepts of anti-racism. My goal for that course was to educate people, yes, but to train them, but give them a chance to become anti-racism actors themselves. So in that particular course, I asked them to choose anything of their choice, any problem of their choice. So I would say, create your own activism against this particular issue. Then I'll let them do it. I'll watch them. I'll give them feedback on their activism, and I'll say, launch your activism, and they'll launch that, and the feedback they would get, they'll be very happy because they feel like they have done the work. I haven't done the work. I've helped them do the work. So they take that experience of doing the work beyond that course. And when they go out, they can say, this is an example of what I've done. It's not a racism project I've carried out. It's how I executed it. These are the challenges that I faced when I carried out this project. And whatever they learn from that course stays with them. So I asked the students to actually design a workshop. So instead of just creating a project, they designed several anti-racism workshops, which was very good, because now they can go out after this course and offer this kind of workshops to different companies, to different people, different institutions who need this kind of training. So they can now have the skills to then offer these types of training, which I think that Finland needs. And if I go one step back, the activism. One of the things the students did in the past was they realized that international students from Africa and mostly and Asia to come in, they would need to pass these English language tests, IELTS or TOEFL, to prove that they can speak in English. And so, for example, when I took the job, the first thing I told my boss was that this language thing I can't work with it because it's outright racist. And he said, well, how can you replace it? And so he gave me a chance to create something else. So what I did was I had to implement interviews as a way of testing the applicants who applied into the program, so they could apply, and I would test the language. They didn't have to go pay any corporation to test their language. And those tests don't make any sense because they expire after every 2 years. And you have to go back after every 2 years as if we forget the language after 2 years. So when the students came in, they recognized that was a problem. So what they did was 4 years ago, the first group of students wrote an open letter to Open Academy and to all other head of programs, asking them to refrain from using this language policy. And so they helped me. Their voice was more amplified than mine because I was a single person. There were a group of students who wrote that letter. And the letter gained a lot of traction. So the traction that came from the letter made them start listening. 2 years after that, a lot of students came and they said, oh, but that letter was never answered. We're going to write our own letter. And then 2 years ago, they listened because Global Academy and University of Helsinki tasted this pilot project where there were two first universities which opened the door for what is now a norm, which is basically that students who have started completing university studies in English anywhere in the world, no restriction, can submit a certificate that shows that my university education was completed in English, and that would be enough for them to come here and study in English. So I can say that when I look at that change of policy, which is now today part of the higher education admissions policies, I can see the hand of my students in making that possible. And that makes me happy.
That is beautiful. I love that so very much. As a person who actually, I feel like guilty now. I used to be an English teacher and I used to train people for the IELTS exam, and I know how costly it is for people to be able to take. And I know how it's just imperfect. Like to say that on that one day when you paid all that money for the exam, that you'll be able to perform at that particular thing. People have all kinds of situations going on in their lives. They might get sick or anything like this might happen. And that affects your ability to go to university and to study. It's such I would say a random thing, but it is symptomatic of exclusion in broader ways. I appreciate your students for making a change and for speaking up. I think that that's a great indicator that you're teaching people what they need to learn to be able to help other people learn in their own ways. I had a conversation recently with someone else who was actually saying that for them in their journey, they've had to do a lot of unlearning and not just the picking up new things, but they had to put down some other things as well. For you and your journey, have you had to do any kind of unlearning lately?
Yeah, I've had to do a lot of unlearning. There are a lot of them. Some of them I can't even say in front of this camera. But I've done a lot of unlearning, and some of these things are very personal to me. And I think I am a better person, not because of the things I've learned, but because of the things I've unlearned. I've been in this country 17 years, and I came in from Cameroon, and there was a lot of things that I had to unlearn. Just being here, like I said, is just a testament to the things I've unlearned, because it's easier to learn, but one of the most difficult things is to unlearn things. I myself had a lot of fears. I was I was also very insecure. I've also been very insecure sometimes, and I have had to go through the whole journey of learning how to be an anti-racist person myself. Because, for example, because I believe that to teach anyone about anti-racism, you have to also be a student. As a huge student of anti-racism, I learn. I read lots of books. I have audio books that I listen to when I'm driving. I just want to make sure that I'm spending my time learning. And I think unlearning is a key component towards learning. And I would strongly recommend that everyone keep what they unlearn personal, unless they have to, unless they must share it. So I think my unlearning journey is something personal, and I choose to keep it that way.
That's perfectly fine.
Before you can, I think also it's because sometimes if I'm bold enough to tell about the things I've unlearned, people will use that against me and say it's always been like that, and then they will not see it as something that you've unlearned it. They would see that something as something that as a tag, that it's permanent tag that has to do with you. But they fail to understand that every one of us is we live in a society which is fundamentally patriarchal, capitalist, and racist. And we are all affected by these concepts, consciously or unconsciously. And we should all be trying to unlearn or untie ourselves from the bondage of these concepts.
Can I just say, I was just talking to somebody today actually about the idea of, progress and growth stories. And it's very narrow who's allowed to publicly grow, who can fail and then they can fail upward or they can fail forward, and who can fail and then people see it as a failure, like, oh, that's you, that is who you are and such, right? And for me, I would love for us to be able to live in a world where everybody is allowed to, progress, where you don't have to be born on the scene perfect. That's not the world we live in, I have to say. But I would like to work for a world where it's possible for more people to say, okay, you know what? This wasn't right. So I need to get better. I need to do better. And like where you begin is not your ending point. I think that's a thing where I would love for that to be open to more human beings without consequence. Let's put it that way. This is actually a thing because like I live in a culture in a world where people are, they're afraid of being canceled for many people for good reason. I think I I would never cancel a person for what they have done if they're not doing that anymore. And if they have progressed from there and that sort of thing. If they have changed significantly, and they're doing better, then that's progress. But I think the challenge is when people don't actually confront when they need to change. I think the challenge is when people actually are not willing to look and say, hey, you know what? What I'm doing is not the best thing. Because if we don't ever take that self-critical lens, if we don't ever actually evaluate how we are, then how on earth are we ever going to evolve towards who we want to be? And that's something I find I wish more people would do at some point, just to pause and reflect on, is what I'm doing reflective of who I want to be? Is what I'm doing actually something that's in line with what I believe? And is even what I believe something that needs to evolve as well? Because sometimes our perceptions of the world have to evolve. Sometimes our perceptions of people around us and things have to evolve, as we know more. And I think it's just a process of knowing more so we can do better. Hopefully, we can actually internalize the lessons and evolve forward. But it takes being able to sit with that understanding of things as not being perfect, possibility of imperfection within ourselves, you know, so that way we can actually address it and get somewhere further along the way.
Yeah, talking about cancel culture. The people try to cancel me all my life, and also my journey here doing anti-racism. I think I'm very misunderstood. And I think I'm misunderstood a lot because people think that there is a one way of being anti-racist. And there are certain things that you can't talk about. And I always say that I'm a researcher. This is what I do. If I when I leave my research bubble and I go to the public, my job is not to just to tell them that this is blue is blue. My job is to ask questions. My job is to poke them to think why blue, why they think blue is blue, how they even got to the point of thinking that blue is blue. People are uncomfortable with those kind of talks. I remember giving a talk a few years ago where I highlighted that I labeled the Romans as white, and I labeled Samis as white, and people came for me, and I sat back and I looked at it, and I'm like, do you understand that? Do you understand where I'm from? I'm a Cameroonian. I'm not a Finn. I was born and raised in Cameroon. And if you bring anyone from Cameroon and you present a Roma to them or Sami person to them, guess what they'll say they are? White. But I'm not allowed to say that they are white. I'm only allowed to say that they are non-white. Whiteness isn't static. People from different cultures view different identities differently. You know, I am here in Europe, but I am also Cameroonian. I'm also African. And I can't take away my African lens. You know, I can't just speak from a Eurocentric point of view. I am allowed to speak from both points of view because that's who I am. And people have to understand that when say things, I say things with the luxury of my Eurocentricness and my Africanness. And no one can take that away from me. And if you want to understand me, you must understand these dual identities that I am, because this is who I am. I can't always have a Eurocentric lens, but that's what we are trying to fight against. We're trying to fight against a Eurocentric viewpoint, but you're always asking me, you want me to keep using that viewpoint, and you don't want me to be critical. You don't want me to use other viewpoints, and I think that's one of the things which actually made me stop talking. It took a while for me to start to go back to public to discuss. And people have been using that and saying, no, this guy doesn't know what he's saying. This guy says that, this guy says that. It's because you want to misunderstand me. When you want to misunderstand someone, you'll find every and any reason to misunderstand them. Give yourself a chance to ask. If you feel like I say something that you misunderstand, come to me. Reach out to me and say, why do you say this? I would explain my point of view. But you can't force my point of view out of me because you think that I must speak from your point of view. It doesn't work like that. I am a researcher. I do research. And this is what I do. As a researcher, when I come to the public space, I have to poke you to think. And if you choose to turn that against me, that's on you, not on me.
A lot of people choose not to understand, and that is it's something they choose not to understand. I think they choose to misrepresent, which is something I find a bit more odious, you know? When people will listen to you and try to take the worst out of what you say, or they'll project their perspectives onto it. When the value of talking to someone else is that it's precisely that they bring a different perspective. I mean, isn't that the beauty of interacting with other people? That you get to, for that brief moment, you get to engage with the world from a view that's not your own. And I find that such a missed opportunity when we don't get to consider what the world is from a lens that's not our own. But that lens is shaped by your experiences and is shaped by where you come from, is shaped by who you are. So I would love a little more context, if you don't mind sharing, about you and your background. And I know you here. I know you in the context of being here in Finland as a researcher, as, you know, a senior lecturer, but you've had a journey to get here. So what has that journey been, and how has that shaped you to be this person that I see now?
So I came into this country in 2008 as a master's student at University of Oulu. And when people ask me, How was it then? I said, that was a time when if you had a permit, work permit as a cleaner, you couldn't work as a dishwasher. You had to go to the police to apply for a permit as a dishwasher to do dishwashing. If you had a permit as a postly delivery person, you could not work as a cleaner. You had to go back to the police to apply for extra permits to work in something else. And so these were very interesting times. Mm. So one of the most significant things that happened when I did when I was doing my master's degree was I was excited about my master's topic. My master's research was about the effects of poverty on education in Cameroon. And I was so excited. I was like, this is going to change the world. I had this whole big dream of working for the UN, the UNESCO, and all of these international organizations. That was my goal. Like very naive. So I met this one Danish professor who came in as a guest, as a visiting lecturer, and he looked at me and he said, "What do you want to do when you finish this master's?" And I said, "I want to stay in Finland." And he said, "You know what?" I said, "Then you're working on the wrong research." I'm like, "But I want to be a researcher." Is it? And he said, "Is it what you want to work on for your PhD?" I'm like, "Yes." And he said, "Why?" He told me that there are a lot of people who are working on that research. He said, even UNESCO is working on that same research. And he advised me not to do it. He said, if you want to stay here and if you want to gain respect in this country, do research about the people in this country. Get to know them. Get to be an expert about something that has to do with them. And that kind of stayed with me. So when I chose to do my PhD, I wanted to talk about something about racism, but I wasn't bold enough to talk about racism. I was trying to go around the bush. Then my supervisor told me, "I see what you're trying to do. You have to be bold enough, but you have to be careful because they'll come for you. And if you want to talk about racism, talk about racism. If you don't want to talk about racism, don't talk about racism. You're passionate about racism, but you need to be bold enough to talk about it." At the time, there wasn't any black researcher working about racism, and there was just no one in Finland working about or doing research on anti-racism education. They were looking at anti-racism, not within the sphere of education. I was very interested in asking the question: what is anti-racism education in Finland? Does it exist? If it exists, how does it exist? Where does it exist? And who are the ones doing this anti-racism work? And what's driving them? And what can they do better? And then, very interestingly, my supervisor, whom I love and respect very much, I think he was the best supervisor for me. I don't think there would ever have been anyone at all that would help bring me to where I am today. He didn't believe in some of the concepts I was using. He didn't believe in the issue of whiteness. One of the things he said to me was, "Me, you can't blame me for the sins of white people who've lived before me." And he's a professor of interculturalism and multiculturalism. And so he said, "Your goal here is to make me believe. If you can convince me, you can convince anyone else." And so I spent the first 2 years of my PhD trying to understand what he was doing. I did no publication. I had no publication. All my time was to understand what intercultural education was, interculturality is, multiculturalism. So I did I went into that studies and I wanted to understand what exactly he was doing. Because unless I understood what he was doing, if I didn't understand what he was doing, I couldn't show him my design of what I was trying to do. So when I understood exactly what he was up to, I then said, "Okay, I went and told him, this is what you're doing." He said, "Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing." I'm like, "Okay, this is what I want to do." Because your multiculturalism, interculturalism, the way it is designed in Finland is more about asking those who come into Finland the one question: are you a good immigrant? Are you doing things the way we want you to do things here? And but then I said, that's not my interest. My interest is to turn that same question to the host and ask the same question: are you a good host? Are you treating those who are coming in with those who have less power? Are you treating them fairly? Are you being just? how you're handling equity in your work, not equality. How are you doing? How is equity being handled in your work, in your relationship with these people who are outsiders? And so once the one that difference was clearly established, that's where I started doing my research. And it took just 2 years. So I can say I did my PhD in 2 years. I first spent the first 2 years just to understand the first concept, interculturality, multiculturalism. I used the second 2 years to start doing the work. And initially, our whole research was supposed to look at one NGO which was doing anti-racism in Finland at that time. And then at some point, when I contacted the NGO and I asked them, I was trying to understand, have some input from them. I asked them, so what can you do differently in your work? Is there something that you think you can change? And they all said no. They are the perfect anti-racism program. And I saw that I knew it wasn't perfect because they were doing 1 hour lecture to different schools. And within the 1 hour lecture, they also talk about multiculturalism because the funding was based on multiculturalism. Now they would go in that multiculturalism framework and then add a few lines or a few sentences or add something very minimal on racism. Very minimal. And I was like, there's much more we can do. So when that happened, it broke my heart because I realized that I could not do the kind of pieces I wanted to do with them. So then it forced me into doing a different type of research where I was trying to look at not just one NGO, but what's happening all around within education. But I focused on the formal education, informal education, and the non-formal education, basically the parents. How were all these different groups teaching about racism in Finland?
I love that you were able to evolve, thinking along the ways, but then evolve the thinking of others with you. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things to do as an educator when you can do both those things simultaneously. It's a lovely thing to see.
Yes, and I didn't tell you this. This is also a very significant part of my story that I like to share. But I don't speak Finnish. Although I've been here, close to 17 years, 16, 17 years. I don't speak Finnish. And people always ask me, why don't you speak Finnish? And I'm like, it's a conscious choice from my side. When I came to this country, I realized very quickly that there were two types of immigrants. One set of immigrants were strongly advised to go learn the language. And then there were another set of immigrants who were not advised to learn the language. The first of immigrants were people who look like me. They would come in, they would say, to be successful in this country, success was tied to your ability to speak the language. And then when I looked at what success meant, I looked at people who spoke the language and I asked them, what kind of jobs do you do? Now, this was 2008, right? 2008. They were still working as cleaners. They were still working as post delivery men. None of them were working no one at that time was working as a bus driver or in taxi or any of these things. So I was like, this is not what success looks to me. This is not success. So I'm like, okay, let me look at the other group. I looked at the other group. They were mostly white, and they were called experts, and they were working in jobs which they were not required to speak Finnish language. I'm like, that's what I want to be. I want to be that group. But I realized very quickly that I didn't have a component to be, which was whiteness. And I'm like, I don't look white, but whiteness is not just about my looks. Whiteness also is what they embody. They look at them and think that they're educated. Even if some of them were not educated, were not that educated. I realized that they were like, because they have their whiteness, there were other components which were overlooked. And I'm like, okay, I want to have all those other components. I want to be as educated as I can, just educated, knowledgeable in a way that I can fit very well into those spaces, even if I am not white.
Hmm.
Or even though I'm not white. So that's why I chose to do a PhD. That's why I chose to do a PhD, not based on a problem that was relevant at that time. And this is what I always advise most of my people who want to do a PhD. If you want to do a PhD, don't try to solve a problem today. Think about a problem that is there in the future. So by the time you're done with your PhD, that problem will still be there, and you will be the one person who will be called to come and create or teach about interventions to that problem. So What I did when I did my PhD was I identified that there was a problem which no one was talking about, and I wanted to study that problem so that, and by the time I finished my PhD, what everyone was talking about was anti-racism within education. And so I situated myself in that space where I was the expert. I was the one. I was the go-to person that people would come to when it comes to that topic. So to do a PhD, don't just choose a topic that you're passionate about. Choose a topic that would solve a problem in the future. Even if it's in the present, you should think about the future because it takes time to do a PhD. And so I wish I would speak Finnish language, but I'm not kicking myself so much because I don't speak the language. I feel as Finnish as any other immigrant who speaks the language can feel. Now, I do understand bits and pieces, but if speaking the language is tied to, 'cause even in Cameroon, Cameroon is a bilingual country, right? Speaking French is also tied to being a Cameroonian, and I don't speak French. So I've been that's me being a rebel all my life. Whenever you tie in any language to some form of success, the rebel in me says, Amin, fight, fight. And so that's my whole life has been all about fighting narratives and trying to create new narratives and showing people that there is nothing as one size fits all. No, there's no single answer to problem. We all can create different answers. We all can be different answers to the problems that we face in the world. But the most important thing for our journey upwards is to see ourselves as the answer, see the work we do as the answer. And if you see yourself and the work you do as an answer that can lift yourself and the community upward, my advice would be put as much effort as you can. It will not be perfect. You are not trying to aim for perfection. All you're trying to do is push that elephant out of the room.
I love that so much. And I respect what you're doing, respect all the things that you mentioned. I'm going to have another conversation with you at some point about the role of racism and I would say English imperialism when it comes to the idea of that in academia and why is there this conflation of to be considered educated and to be an expert one must speak English. That's a whole different conversation. Um, but right now, I actually would love to be able to leave people with a little bit of positive energy because I know you bring so much when it comes to positive change. I want to be able to like make certain people can focus on that. And so I want to know, what do you think is something that anybody can do better today?
I think people should find what they're passionate about and invest time and effort into doing that. For me, it's more about I'm a service kind of person. I like to create things and I like to be of service to people. So for me, when I serve people, I I am happy. When I'm a servant, that's when I'm most pleased. So I think we need to find the things that make us happy, the things that push our communities forward, and we do that, and we try to get to somewhere. If I leave here and I'm going to let's say the shop and I'm walking, I need to be able to take the first step, the second, the third, then the fourth, and the fifth. So whatever you're trying to do, take baby steps. Because for every baby in life, the baby learns to crawl, and the baby learns to walk, and the baby learns to run. All through these different stages, the baby fails numerous times. The baby falls, the baby cries, the baby does different things. But the baby never gives up. The baby's will to succeed is stronger than all the numerous times the baby fails. We are all grown up babies. We've all gone through that stage. We all have that spirit within us. So we must go back to that our baby spirit. And we need to nurture that baby spirit so that we understand, we kind of go back to it and remember that we are here not because of the successes that we've had. We are here because of the failures that we've had that have molded us to who we are. And that's why sometimes I am happy when I fail. because that's the first measure to the next time that I succeed. The story of my life is wrapped in millions of failed attempts with different things that I've done in my life. But those failures help build me because my will to succeed is stronger, like that baby. My will to succeed is stronger than anything else. So we all have to tap that baby instinct in us and strive to succeed and ignore how many times we fail. We to look the failures and learn from those. That would be my one advice.
I love that. And I have to say, the things that you've learned along the way, you've absolutely been helping other people to learn from as well. And I'm one of the people who definitely learned from you. So thank you so much for being such a positive person in my life and the lives of other people around you. And we're so grateful to have you around in the community. So I can't wait to see how you go from here.
Thank you so much. And one way we all go from here is upward.
Yay.